Welcome back. I am Captain Xavier, and I am starting a new series that I am calling Nerf Rewired, which is going to be in-depth guides on rewiring electric blasters. I've gotten a lot of requests on doing those as Monday mod tips, but they are far more complicated a concept than I really would consider a simple mod tip. This is actually a full mod guide, and I decided to do a special series just on rewiring blasters since I am going to be doing quite a few of those in the future. I decided to start big, and we're going to be doing the Khaos that I did for Jomo this week. And so we'll be going on exactly where I mounted the switches and how I mounted the switches and all of the exact wiring. I'm considering making the wiring diagrams that I use available on my Facebook page. Let's get this thing open. I'm going to skip right to the part where I've got the blaster open and I'm starting in on the wiring. So let's do this thing. Get our soldering iron heating up because we are going to need to gut this section like a fish. Gonna be an awful lot here that's going to get removed. We also need to work out where our switches are going to go, which is going to be largely based on the rev trigger and all of that. We do not have a handy dandy super cool switch holder like we have for the Rapid Strike, but we should be able to work it out. After all, it doesn't need to be pretty, it just needs to work. So yeah, I'm going to do it like that. I'm going to Dremel out a notch right there, and then I'm just going to hot glue this right there. Alright, I'm now desoldering everything, all these nasty circuit boards on all of these motors that achieve nothing. Alright, and that is all of the unwanted circuit boards and wires and all of that. The only one that we're going to end up putting back in, as soon as I can figure out where on earth it went, is, of course, the Jamb door switch. I believe is this one. And it has 3 wires on because previously it controlled electric braking, but we are not going to be using the electric brake. We're just going to be using it as a switch for the voltmeters. We're not going to be doing anything else to the motors other than wiring them up. So we can get rid of all of that. We can work out the details on this. Okay, that's our rev trigger in place. We can still easily solder to it. Now we need to figure out the fire trigger, which does not have a very long draw, which is fine because we don't need it to have one. We're going to wire this switch in right there. So again, we need to do a little bit of dremeling. Lovely. Let's talk about wiring. We're going to use green for positive and yellow for negative for no readily apparent reason. The negative is going to go from the battery to the negative on the flywheel motors, as well as to the negative on the conveyor motor. But it is also going to go to the normally closed on the trigger motor. That way, when the trigger is not pressed, a negative current will go to the positive on the pusher motor, which will short it out and stop it, because this we want to come to a halt when you let go of the trigger. Otherwise, it will slowly spin down and you will continue to push balls even though the flywheels are not necessarily spinning, which is not good. So we're going to start with our negative, and I need to figure out which way the motors are spinning. Okay. So the negative is the further one. Now, when wiring something like this, I recommend starting with the motors and working your way back, because the motors aren't going anywhere. You know exactly where the motors are going to be. Whereas at the very far end, we have the XT60 connector, which is variable length. It can be however long or short you want it, and so if you end with that, then you don't have to worry about your wires not being long enough. Alright, that is all of the negative complete. This will be the part that connects to the battery, so I just need to connect the XT60 to it. It then goes to the normally closed on the trigger switch, so that what's coming off of COM will be negative when the trigger is not pulled, which will be what goes to the pusher trigger. So we're going to do that one next. Green will be our positive. And again, we are going to start with the motors. We're going to start with the pusher motor, just for fun and excitement. Now, the negative can simply go to anything and everything that needs a negative on one big circuit. The positive, these two will need to be separate because they are coming off of separate switches. And again, we will start with the motor. Okay, that is the fire trigger fully wired other than its input, which we're going to deal with next. So power will come off the battery and go to the normally open on the rev switch. The COM on the rev switch will then go both to the firing trigger as well as the positive on the flywheels. So the firing trigger only has power when the rev trigger is pulled. That is the lock. So you can pull the trigger, but it won't kick in until the rev trigger kicks in. So here we go, the final wiring. Alright, now we find out if I did it right, or if it explodes. Looks like the wiring's good. Let's try it with a battery with some scrote. Yeah, that sounds better. Alright, all that is left is the voltmeter, which I have forgotten up to this point. But that should be very simple. Hopefully. First of all, we need a voltmeter. Alright, for this particular one, he asked for blue. So, I'm reasonably certain I have a blue one in here. Alright. Now where are we going to put it? I'm going to do it right here. Alright, we start with the Dremel and get the basic shape. And then we switch to files. And there we have it. Blue voltmeter. Rigged to the jam door. So here we have the wiring 100% complete. And I'll go over it all one last time, just in case any of you have any questions, and I'll try to get it as close to you guys as possible. So we'll start with the negative line. From the battery, the negative goes to the normally closed on the trigger switch. It then goes from there to the negative on both motors. And that is all interconnected because it doesn't matter as long as they're all connected. But it starts on that trigger. And the reason being, that way, when the switch is in the closed position, negative is going to both sides of the pusher motor, so that when you let go of the trigger, electric braking kicks in, and this comes to a complete stop, so the blaster doesn't kind of slowly dribble out a last few balls when you let go of the trigger, because you don't want that. Positive is the more complicated one. It goes from the first to the normally open on your rev trigger. The COM on the rev trigger then goes to the normally open on the firing trigger. The COM on the firing trigger then goes to the positive on the conveyor belt motor. The COM is connected to both negative and positive depending on the position of the switch. So you have negative going to one side and either negative or positive going to the other side depending on the position of this switch, and that is your electric brake. Positive then goes from there, from the normally open as well, goes to the positive on the other on your flywheel motors. And that one is always connected through from this switch. And one of the reasons that you kind of daisy chain it off of all of these things is to reduce the amount of wires that are going through your blaster. You could do them all separately, but you'd have twice as many wires in the blaster as necessary. It would be able to keep things a little bit potentially easier to tell them apart. But it wouldn't be as clean because you'd have extra wires, and you'd have trouble getting the shell to close with all those extra wires running through there. So I recommend daisy chaining it like this. Having the positive go first to the rev trigger and then to the firing trigger also creates an electric lock. So the firing trigger, you can push it without having the rev trigger pushed, but there's no power going to it, and so it won't do anything until the rev trigger is pushed. Now, the way this blaster is designed, pulling the trigger also activates the rev trigger, whether you want it to or not. They are linked. And so, in this case, This switch actually activates just a hair before this one does, but it doesn't matter because this one doesn't have power until this one does. The torque on these motors are such that it could probably handle firing from a stop, but you do run the risk of jamming if you haven't pulled your rev trigger first. But that is the wiring. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, let me know down in the description, or down in the comment section. If you'd like me to send you the diagram for this, the wiring diagram that I have for this, it's also the exact same for the Hyperfire. Ping me on my commission email address and I can send you the file that I have. It's not the greatest, but I'm able to read it, so hopefully that will help. If you have any requests for future videos, go ahead and put them in the comment section. And as always, thank you guys for watching.